Diablo 4 Season 8 is almost here, and we have got for you today the tier list for the Barbarians. I'm super excited to bring this to you. We're over here on Cliptis.com. I'm going to have all of our builds posted right here. There's going to be several different ways you can find the builds, but this will be very, very easy to spot everything you're going to need. If you want to find any of the Barbarian builds, you just come over to the Barbarian endgame builds right here. They're all going to be listed for you right here. These will all be updated for the optimal setup for Season 8 for you. Over here on Mobalytics, we're also going to have everything listed out. I'm going to be officially writing the tier list for Mobalytics this season for the Barbarian. So if you want to find any of those builds, you can come right over here. You can go to the tier list. They're all going to be right there. You can also find all of my builds on Mobalytics too. Depends on whatever platform you want to use. We're going to have builds coming out for you. Now, that's not why you're here. You're here to see the rankings. Let's take a look at the rankings for Diablo for Season 8 Barbarian. Now, I know that there were a bunch of nerfs for their Earthquake builds. However, it's still going to be incredibly strong. I have put that Earthquake with Hammer of the Ancients is still going to be the top build for the Barbarians. I did a little bit of testing, and if you take a look right here, this is on the PTR. Now, scaling from the PTR pits to the live server has actually been pulled back. The pits are going to be a little bit easier than they were, so there's a much smoother transition going from Season 7 to Season 8. This is what it looked like with no boss powers. I made sure that we did a lot of testing without the boss powers to see what it feels like. Now, if we're still doing this kind of damage with no boss powers on the PTR, when they pulled back the damage that Earthquake does, it's still going to be very, very strong. Now, we cut this down by, let's say, 75%. We're still doing hundreds of billions of damage with Quakes. So if you can see this 500 billion damage, take 75% of that. We're still in the hundreds of billions of damage. It will still be strong. And if they pull back that scaling, we're still going to be able to push pits with this build and this setup. So I was very excited. I had 2 minutes left on a pit 90, which the scaling was way through the roof inside of the PTR. So you got to take that into consideration. This was still a strong build, and it's still going to be going into Season 8. The next one that we have on here is going to be just strictly for bossing. So technically, is it really an S tier build? It is for bossing, so we're going to leave it right there where it is. The way that Mighty Throw is going to work, you're going to build up a ton of different buffs for one big shot. Now, there is a way to give yourself 2 attacks with Mighty Throw in order to get yourself not a 12-second cooldown, but more like a 6-second cooldown. The way that Mighty Throw is going to work, and the reason that it's probably not going to be the best pit pushing build, is that Mighty Throw can only work once every 12 seconds in order to maximize the damage. Now, in order to get that to cut down in half, we put on an aspect called Weapon Master, and then that is going to give you 2 charges to your Mighty Throw, which will allow us basically to have every 6 seconds we can cast again. Now, we'll see exactly how that works out with all the buffs. It's probably still going to be once every 12 seconds to maximize the way that Mighty Throw works and to get the most out of it. But if you think about it, if you're running through a pit and you're waiting 12 seconds to cast, that is a really, really long time. So this will be your ultimate one big bonk bossing build. We'll have to see exactly how hard Mighty Throw hits when the season goes live. Now, reading through the patch notes, it had looked like Mighty Throw was getting a nerf. They went from 200% damage down to 50. However, there was a little note in there that said they fixed an issue where Warrior's Mighty Throw was getting an additive bonus instead of a multiplicative. That 200% that was getting added onto Mighty Throw, even though it said it was a multiplicative number, it was actually additive. So now we're going from 200% additive to 50x multiplier. This was actually a buff to Mighty Throw. Mighty Throw was doing trillions and trillions of damage, and it was even getting upwards of trillions without having any boss powers on. So this was a buff to Mighty Throw, not a nerf. So Mighty Throw is going to get even stronger. We're going to put that in S tier, and we're going to leave it right there. Now we're going to go down to our A/S tier, kind of floating right in the middle there. There's still a lot that we haven't learned yet. Whirlwind got a nice little buff. It gained about 60% increase of its base damage. It also had a nice little rune change. Now, I do wish that they had kept the while you're channeling Whirlwind, you gain additional damage to Whirlwind instead of additional damage to Mighty Throw, well, a weapon mastery skill. They didn't do that, but that's okay. What they did give us, and this is really where we're not sure what it's going to feel like, how often it's going to hit. What we're getting now is bleed damage increased from 40% of Whirlwind's base damage over 5 seconds to 120% of the weapon damage over 5 seconds. So now the damage itself went from 32% to 52%. Those are all really great buffs. You pair that with Earthquakes, We're going to see exactly how that goes. So we're going to put this, especially for your speed farming, I really do think that this is going to be probably one of the fastest builds for the Barbarian for speed farming. Now we got to talk about Double Swing. Double Swing really has never been on the main stage. I did play a couple Double Swing builds a couple seasons back, especially when the bleed was super strong in Season 4. I was able to push it to a relatively high tier in the pit, but that was mostly just on bleed. We're talking straight damage here. Double Swing got some incredibly big buffs, and it really wasn't to Double Swing itself. One of the modifiers, now the way that Double Swing works when you temper into it, it tempers on your weapons as chance to hit twice. What happened was, on the Twin Strike gloves, we got this new aspect on your Twin Strikes, which replaced the critical strike chance, which is okay because getting a critical strike chance capped is relatively easy. It replaced that with chance to deal double damage with your Double Swing. Now, you have chance to hit twice. You also have chance to deal double damage, which none of the other core skills have that. After casting Double Swing 4 times, your Double Swing will continue to hit 2 additional times, each dealing 70 to 100% increased damage over 3 seconds. So there's a whole bunch of these really big buffs that are going into Double Swing. It's actually kind of fun to see. I do have a video here of Double Swing on the public test realm. This was with no boss powers as well. I was in a pit tier 70. Now, not as quite as high as Earthquakes, but we know how strong Earthquakes were. This was not an optimized setup. We're still hitting for hundreds of millions of damage, going up into the billions and billions of damage. This was super exciting. That was a billion right there. So Double Swing itself is going to start doing quite a lot of damage. Now, we're going to be building a pure damage Double Swing build for the season. It's not going to have any Quakes. It's not going to have any Dust Devils. We're just going to see what it feels like when we get into it with all of these brand new modifiers. Super excited. What also is going to be coming out is going to be a pure Whirlwind build. I have that at A. That could swap down to B depending on where the modifiers land. Now, we talked a little bit about Whirlwind already, but that's where I'm going to put it. I'm going to leave it at A until we get in there and we figure out how it's going to roll. But what I'm very excited to see, and shout out to Beat Dropper for pointing it out to me, there was a buff to the Crown of Lucian, which directly affects the way that your Death Blow works. Death Blow goes hand in hand with the Crown of Lucian because you want to be spending a ton of resources with the Death Blow in order to proc your BLT, your Banished Lord's Talisman, as much as you possibly can. What's been happening for a bunch of seasons now is that the Crown of Lucian has basically not interacted with a bunch of different things like Limitless Rage or Edge Masters, which would actually be buffing the amount of damage that Death Blow is doing. That was fixed. In the last patch notes, they're going to be fixing that interaction so that now Death Blow will receive all of those buffs. Death Blow was already very strong. I had a Deathquake build in the current Season 7 that was clearing very, very high into the pits, into the 130s, 140s, and that was using Death Blow to spawn Quakes. The Death Blow itself was in the 110s, 115s. Now, we're going to see exactly what it's going to feel like now. Very excited because Death Blow is one of my favorite builds. With the changes to the way that your third blade is working, we'll see what the new Death Blow brings in the season, but I'm very excited to roll this build out for everybody. Now, all of the core skills did get some buffs. About 10%, Hammer of the Ancients got about a 9%. And then we have your Rupture, and then we have your Kick. If you've never played a Kick build before, absolutely get out there and try it out, because if you've ever seen the movie 300, it feels like you're straight out of the movie, straight out of Sparta. You just straight kick enemies, and they go flying. It is a ton of fun. And I do think Rupture is actually going to have a spot in this season. With the way the boss powers work, Rupture is still very strong. I have a leveling build guide coming out for Upheaval. It does work very well during the leveling process, and maybe a little bit into some of the endgame depending on how much attack speed you can build, and if you like the playstyle. And then we all know Hammer of the Ancients, that is one of my favorite builds. It did get a small buff, like I said earlier. However, it's still just that. It's still going to be used as a way to increase the damage from the overpower of Hammer of the Ancients. Now, maybe next season we'll see some huge increases to this and we can get back to big bonking with the Hammer of the Ancients. There's been a lot of people asking about Steel Grasp. Steel Grasp is a weapon mastery throw and it's going to be affected by all of the other buffs that we're going to be getting that will also be affecting Mighty Throw. It doesn't have the type of damage that Mighty Throw has. So it's definitely not going to be something that we're going to be able to spam. And if you're using all of the aspects, you're only going to be able to use it once every 12 seconds. The damage just won't be there for Steel Grasp. So it's not going to be your number one and not even close to Mighty Throw, but it might still be something that somebody puts together if they feel like having a fun build to play where you're just grabbing everything and pulling it in. Bash has been a fan favorite. I actually played a Bash build on the PTR. It was a Bash double swing build, and it was a lot of fun. I even took a straight Bash Earthquake build. That's all we did, was just Bash and Earthquakes, and it went pretty high into the pits. I don't know how it's going to be affected too much coming out of the PTR. It wasn't a top performer, so we're going to put it at C for now until we get in. Same thing with Flay for your basic skills. Bleed might actually be on the rise. We'll see where the boss powers land after all of the changes. They may just give you some bleed. Now, we're going to talk about bleed a little bit, because what I did try, and we're going to go back to the Whirlwind damage here, is on the PTR. I put this build together. Now, for anybody, any Barbarian out there that remembers Season 4, that was Bleed's glory days. We had a Whirlwind build that used Teriel's Might in order to spread bleed to the entire screen. You never stopped moving. You did a ton of damage. I recreated that build with the boss powers on the PTR. This is what it looked like here. It has super high, super fast attack speed, because in that season, we didn't actually have attack speed scaling. Now we have attack speed scaling with Whirlwind. All you do is keep yourself at full life, and then you just start spamming Teriel's Might, and then everything gets hit by this bleed and it dies. Now, this is on Torment 4 here. This has boss powers active, but it flies through all of the content. So if you're looking for a speed farmer, let's say you're going to be running the Infernal Hordes, this is great for that. It's going to clear the entire room. It's going to bleed everything in the room that it touches. This could be the ultimate speed farming build for anything outside of the pits, which is where we're also going to spend half of our time when we're farming for Opticite, or when you're farming for materials to upgrade your gear. So when you're running maybe even the Undercity, this is probably going to be, if the powers still work the same, one of the fastest Barbarian builds out there. Super excited to bring this to everybody. And then coming in at the very bottom of the list is going to be Rend. There just really wasn't much on the PTR when we got to try it out. So unfortunately, it's still going to be down here. Maybe one day that will pop up just a little bit more. Those are going to be all of the rankings that I have for the Barbarian. I would love to hear exactly what you guys think. So make sure you hit up the comments about the Barbarian rankings. Maybe you got to test some fun interactions on the PTR. Let me know. I'm very excited to bring you everything Barbarian this season.